In the mountains of western Mexico, hidden roads weave through pine forests and volcanic ridges. For decades, these landscapes have been the stage for a conflict that rarely appears in full view: the war between the state and the cartels. Among the many names that emerged from this shadow world, one became particularly feared: Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, better known by his alias, El Mencho. For years, intelligence agencies across multiple countries described him as one of the most powerful drug traffickers in the world. The United States government offered a $15 million reward for information leading to his capture. Entire military operations were planned around the possibility of finding him. And yet, despite global surveillance and repeated attempts to locate him, he remained elusive until 2026. On February 22 of that year, Mexican military forces launched a targeted operation in the highlands of Jalisco. During the confrontation, gunfire erupted. Several cartel members were killed. Among the wounded was the man authorities had been searching for more than a decade. He died shortly after, while being transported by helicopter to Mexico City. Within hours, highways across Mexico were blocked with burning vehicles. Armed groups attacked infrastructure in multiple states. The death of a single man had triggered chaos across an entire country. But who was El Mencho? How did a boy born in rural poverty become the leader of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the world? And how did international investigations eventually close in on him? This is the story of El Mencho, his rise, his network, the global hunt for him, and the final operation that ended his life. Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes was born in 1966 in the rural municipality of Aguililla in the Mexican state of Michoacán. The region is mountainous, isolated, and historically poor. For generations, communities there depended on agriculture: corn, avocados, livestock. But the same geography that made farming difficult also made the region ideal for another kind of economy: the drug trade. By the 1970s and 1980s, parts of western Mexico had become deeply connected to narcotics trafficking networks. Marijuana fields and later synthetic drug laboratories spread across remote valleys. Children growing up in these areas often faced limited opportunities. In interviews with investigators years later, several witnesses described the environment in which Oseguera Cervantes grew up. One former resident of Aguililla reportedly told authorities, "Everyone knew someone involved in the trade. It was simply part of life in the region." During his youth, Oseguera reportedly left Mexico and migrated to the United States. Like many migrants at the time, he traveled north in search of work. But according to court records from the United States, his time there would soon intersect with drug trafficking. In 1994, Oseguera was convicted in a U.S. federal court for conspiracy to distribute heroin in California. He served nearly 3 years in prison before being deported back to Mexico. For investigators studying his life later, that conviction represented a turning point. The experience exposed him not only to the risks of the drug trade, but also to the transnational networks that sustained it. When he returned to Mexico in the late 1990s, the country's criminal landscape was rapidly changing. Old cartels were fracturing, new organizations were emerging, and Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was about to enter that world. When Oseguera returned to Mexico after his deportation, the country's criminal underworld was undergoing a transformation. Large cartels that once dominated the trade were splintering into smaller factions. This fragmentation created opportunities for ambitious figures willing to navigate the violent landscape. One of the groups operating in western Mexico at the time was the Mencho cartel. The organization had connections to the powerful Sinaloa cartel, one of the dominant forces in international drug trafficking. According to law enforcement investigations, Oseguera eventually became associated with a key figure within that network, Ignacio Nacho Coronel Villarreal, a high-ranking trafficker linked to Sinaloa operations. Through this relationship, Oseguera reportedly rose within the organization's enforcement wing. Sources later described him as leading groups of sicarios, cartel gunmen responsible for security and violence. The reputation he developed during this period was one of discipline and extreme brutality. Former investigators from Mexico's federal police described his approach as strategic rather than impulsive. One intelligence report summarized his role in the organization. Quote, Oseguera Cervantes demonstrated operational control and the ability to coordinate violent enforcement actions across multiple territories. End quote. But the structure that supported him would not last. In 2010, Ignacio Coronel was killed during a military operation. The power vacuum that followed destabilized the region. Several factions competed for control of trafficking routes in Jalisco and neighboring states. Among those attempting to reorganize the network were Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes and another cartel figure known as Eric Valencia Salazar, nicknamed El 85. Together, they began forming what would become a new organization, a cartel that would soon attract global attention. Around 2007 to 2009, the emerging group led by Oseguera Cervantes began consolidating power in the state of Jalisco. The organization called itself the Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJNG. At first, the group presented itself publicly as a vigilante force, opposing rival criminal organizations. Early propaganda videos circulated online showing masked men claiming they were protecting communities from extortion and violence. But investigators quickly concluded that these messages were strategic. Behind the messaging, the CJNG was expanding aggressively. Territories previously controlled by other groups became targets. Local police departments were infiltrated or intimidated. Financial networks were established to move money across borders. The organization grew rapidly. Within a few years, intelligence reports suggested CJNG had become one of the most powerful cartels in Mexico. According to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, the group eventually developed operations in all 50 U.S. states through distribution networks. The cartel also became heavily involved in synthetic drug production. Methamphetamine laboratories appeared across western Mexico. Later, the group would become a major trafficker of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid responsible for thousands of overdose deaths in North America. But the CJNG also gained notoriety for something else: its military-style tactics. In 2015, cartel members shot down a Mexican military helicopter using a rocket-propelled grenade. The incident shocked security analysts. It demonstrated that CJNG possessed both the weapons and organization to challenge state forces directly. Years later, the cartel would attempt another high-profile attack, an assassination attempt against Mexico City's police chief in 2020. For investigators studying the organization, these operations reflected a leadership style attributed to Oseguera Cervantes: centralized control, strategic violence, and a willingness to escalate conflicts. As one former DEA official later described it, quote, Mencho controlled everything. The organization moved according to his decisions, end quote. By the mid-2010s, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes had become one of the most wanted criminals in the world. Multiple agencies were searching for him: Mexico's federal government, the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, Interpol. Despite this pressure, he remained largely invisible. Unlike other cartel leaders who cultivated public images, Oseguera rarely appeared in photographs or videos. Most of what authorities knew about him came from intelligence operations and captured cartel members. Investigators began targeting his financial network. Money laundering operations linked to CJNG were uncovered across several countries. Banks, shell companies, and real estate transactions formed part of the organization's economic infrastructure. In 2018, the U.S. government increased the reward for information leading to his capture to $15 million. The announcement signaled how significant the threat was considered. Meanwhile, arrests of CJNG members continued. One of the most notable was Oseguera's own son, Ruben Oseguera González, known as El Menchito. He was extradited to the United States and later convicted on drug trafficking charges. Court documents from those proceedings offered rare insight into the cartel's operations. Prosecutors described CJNG as a transnational criminal enterprise responsible for large-scale trafficking of cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and fentanyl. Despite these legal victories, the central figure remained at large. Occasionally, rumors spread that authorities had nearly captured him. Each time, the reports proved false. He had become a kind of myth within the world of organized crime, a figure simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, until the final operation. For years, intelligence suggested that Oseguera Cervantes had retreated deeper into the mountainous regions of Jalisco. The terrain offered natural protection, dense forests, remote villages, and limited road access. According to later reports, international intelligence cooperation eventually helped locate him. In February 2026, Mexican military forces launched a coordinated operation near the town of Tapalpa in southern Jalisco. Troops supported by air reconnaissance moved into the area. The objective was clear: capture the most wanted cartel leader in Mexico. But the mission quickly turned into a firefight. Cartel gunmen opened fire on the approaching forces. Several attackers were killed in the confrontation. Oseguera Cervantes was wounded during the exchange. Military officials later confirmed that he died while being transported by helicopter to Mexico City. The aftermath was immediate. Within hours, cartel members launched coordinated attacks across the country. Vehicles were set on fire. Highways were blocked. Violence erupted across more than 20 states. Authorities described it as retaliation for the death of the cartel's leader. His body was later returned to his family and buried in Jalisco under heavy security. The funeral drew widespread media attention. Some reports described a golden coffin and elaborate floral displays. Others noted the striking contrast between the ceremony and the thousands of victims attributed to cartel violence over the years. For Mexico's government, the operation represented a major victory in the long struggle against organized crime. But for many analysts, it also raised an important question: what happens to a cartel after its leader disappears? The story of Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes reflects a broader reality about organized crime in the modern world. Cartels are not simply groups of criminals. They are complex networks, economic systems, transnational organizations capable of adapting to pressure. The death of a leader does not necessarily mean the end of the structure. In the case of the CJNG, analysts believe the organization still possesses extensive financial resources and regional influence. Investigations continue. Authorities now focus on identifying the individuals who may attempt to assume leadership. At the same time, the legacy of El Mencho remains controversial. For some communities affected by cartel violence, his death represents a form of justice. For others, it is simply another chapter in a long and unresolved conflict. Media coverage has played a powerful role in shaping how figures like Oseguera Cervantes are perceived. Nicknames, dramatic headlines, and narco-corridos often transform criminal figures into symbols. But behind those narratives lies a far more complex reality, one defined by violence, political pressure, and international law enforcement. The rise and fall of El Mencho illustrates how a man from a rural village became one of the most hunted criminals on earth. and how the global effort to stop him ultimately ended in a remote mountain operation. But the forces that created that story remain, and the next chapter in Mexico's long struggle with organized crime is already unfolding.